And really, my whole purpose for everything I do is, at the end of the day, I just want to hear, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." And that's how I live my life, and that's my motive for everything I do.
I had a vision when I was in my early 20s. I was walking along a path, and then suddenly I was elevated like on a cloud, or like a drone view. And I see this long line of people, like vanishing point in the distance, just at the top of their tiny little heads. And as we came up behind the line, I saw prisoners in shackles and chains. Shackles around both ankles, shackles around both wrists, and chained to each other. And they're walking like they're headed into the prison. And as we flew a little further, my sense of justice was pricked, because I see that some of them are out of their chains and they're walking off over the hill. And then the further we went, there were more stepping over the chains because the people in the chains were gone. And I'm like, okay, why are they getting away? What were they guilty of, and why are they free now? And as I was continuing to move over this crowd, I see an angel walking beside them with blood in the tips of his wings that are dragging in the mud, and he's tears streaming down his face, and he's tapping them and telling them, "You're free to go." And the angel on the cloud next to me says, "He needs your help." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "They're all free to go." And as we got to the front of the line, they were walking off the cliff into the lake of fire. I think I was 22 or 23 years old when I had that vision. I didn't really get the concept of it. I mean, I get it, but I didn't realize the biblical magnitude of it. I was probably closer to 40 when I told a guy, "I want to talk in a Bible study in our church about testimony, because the power of the story is so powerful." He said, "Well, what is a testimony?" And I said, "Well, that's when you tell your story." He said, "Are you sure?" And so I started digging into it. Dr. John Sperling and Dr. Rob Brewer really put me through the mill to make sure that I understood what that meant. And so what I found was, in the Ark of the Covenant, there's a testimony. And I went, "What?" Yeah, the testimony.
That's what I'm saying. What?
And
now
so
I'm intrigued.
The next step of that was, I said, "Well, people need to have a vision for their life." And he said, again, "What is a vision?" The Ark of the Covenant is actually called the testimony of God, which is a trip. And then you think about the bud, and you think about the staff, and you're like, "What? Those are some weird things to have inside that box." I mean,
right.
And then if you touch the box, you die. I mean, what?
Yes.
That doesn't make any sense to me, right? Why are we guarding that to that degree? That's a whole teaching all by itself. But when I started digging into vision, one of the things that I studied was that passage in Proverbs that everybody quotes: "Without a vision, the people perish." Mm-hmm. And I started with the Blue Letter Bible and all the commentaries, and you'll notice I've got all the Matthew Henry commentaries in the library in there. As I started looking at perish, I was like, well, they don't succeed, they die. What do you mean perish? And it said they will run around in pure anarchy. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, that's pretty interesting. So what does it mean, vision? And that's where the vision from 20 years ago came up. He said the vision isn't just that they have a plan to go forward, because Habakkuk 2:2 says, "Write the vision so the messenger can carry it." Well, that messenger is the evangelist. And the evangelist is the gospel being brought to the people. The battle is won, you're free to go. That's the message of the gospel of peace that we are supposed to prepare our feet with.
Yes.
It took me years to figure that out. But now I'm looking back at vision. I'm going, so what is the vision? Is it what the ideal scenario is? What is it you're trying to tell me? And when you dig into that word in Proverbs, he says, "Without a vision, the people perish." If they don't understand that hell is real and damnation is imminent, then they run around in full anarchy. Mm-hmm. That picture was saying, if they don't see that cliff, if they don't see that eternal fire, then they will run around like maniacs.
Yes.
Doing whatever they want to, because they feel convinced that there is no consequence coming. But the minute they get the picture of that consequence, they either choose to remain imprisoned or they leave for the cross. And I think when we look at society today, the burden. You mentioned before we started recording the burden of being a missionary. The burden in the church has left.
Yes.
The heart to say, I see them walking off the cliff into the fire, is not what we hear in the pulpit.
No.
What we hear in the pulpit is, how do I build my local church? We visited probably a dozen churches after we left the mega church that we were at for 10 years. We taught there for 10 years. We were deeply involved for 10 years. There was a season we were homeless, and we drove 90 minutes each way to get to that church to serve. We're not there anymore. But what we saw was a pattern that said, this is how you grow a church from 50 to 50,000. And that pattern, we go visit churches now and we see that exact pattern. They're like, come back on XYZ day to go through XYZ program. And I'm like, I know that program. I helped write that program. I helped facilitate that program. And that program has nothing to do with the kingdom. It's all about being indoctrinated into your facility, into your fiefdom. And the only reason that exists, I'm not saying the process doesn't work. Every church that does it grows. But it doesn't bring the level of commitment that says, I'm on my face and I'll sacrifice everything. If it means my family is ostracized, if it means my marriage is in trouble, if it means my financial gain is destroyed, bring it.
Right.
Because I'm going to stand for what's right, because that's what God said.
Right. And there's so much of what you said that I could say so much about. I'm just trying to...
This show has no time limit.
It's so true. I think, too, like when we're talking about these issues, like when you were talking about that vision that you had in your 20s, there needs to be, I think that's where the compassion comes from, too, because Jesus had compassion, right? Mm-hmm. And so this election that I'm running right now is like, God has really laid heavy on my heart to have compassion for the people, even for my enemies, and to realize that they're lost. And so this time around, I've been more bold. And so I knock doors. That's part of what I do, is block walk. And everyone laughs. Because it's one of my strong points. Because I love people. I really do. And people tell you stuff when you knock on their door. So this election, I've run into people who, I can't tell you how many people have just been diagnosed with cancer. Or they have a loved one who's terminal. Or their loved one has just been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Or one man, literally, I'm standing in his garage and his house is for sale, and he's like, I have to sell everything because my wife is divorcing me, and breaks down in tears. And to really be, like you said, an evangelist, and at that moment in time to be bold enough to say, can I pray with you? Yeah. And so it's an opportunity I feel like God has given me this time, because I've been involved in politics for 12 years. Just about knocking doors for other candidates long before I was a candidate, to really not just give them a conservative voter guide, but give them Jesus. Yeah. And to be like, I'm going to pray for you, and to stand there and take, they say in block walking, get in and get out because you have to hit all the voters. And I don't really feel that way all the time. Sometimes I feel like God has different ideas. He has divine appointments. And so I spend time with them. This is
just an excuse to knock on the door.
It is. It is. I've sat with elderly people who've lost their loved one, and they're lonely. They're so lonely. And they just need to know and hear that they matter. I was talking about mission trips when we went to Thailand and even Paraguay. Our culture, the way we treat elderly is so wrong. They are honored in the Asian culture. They are honored in the... In Paraguay as well. And we, in America, and the Bible even talks about age, gray hair is, it's splendor, and how that's where wisdom comes from, and how we're supposed to honor our elders. And so that's something else I see when I knock on doors, how these older people are just alone. And it feels like nobody cares. And so just to have that moment to sit with them. And I think, because, I was really out of politics after school board. I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. And so there's that saying where, we make plans and God laughs, right? Because he has different plans for us, and boy, does he. And so here I am again running for district clerk. But I see now, even as district clerk, people will come up when there's jury, and they'll bring excuses. So many people being diagnosed with cancer, horrible things, a lady who lost her son. And to be able to grab their hand and say, hey, I'm a cancer survivor, there's hope, I'm praying for you. And even we had a gentleman who called once and said, my wife was just diagnosed with cancer, can I get out of jury duty? And of course I said yes, but I felt this prodding to be bold and say, I'm going to give you my phone number, give it to her, I'm a cancer survivor. To make a long story short, we usually meet once a month. We haven't because of the election, but that'll be over soon, thank God. And they ended up coming to church and both accepted Jesus as their Savior, and I have a relationship with her, and I check in with her because I understand the mental part of going through cancer, and I wanted to be proactive and really help her to understand how she needed to protect her mind from the fear that the devil comes at us with. And so now I look back, because I'm like, district clerk, I'm like, really, God? Like, how am I gonna make a difference for you with that? But I really have been able to, and even with my clerks, you know, we sit and we pray, and they know that when things happen in their lives, they know they can come to me and they know I'm going to pray for them. They know that I'm genuine. And so I think it's really about, we really can take Jesus anywhere we go. And so, but he's really teaching me to have compassion for my enemies too, like for the, you know, the people who don't like me. I had one man knocking doors, just, I hate you, I hate you. He couldn't say it enough times. But to walk away and say, God bless you, but to not say it in a snarky way, but to say it in a meaningful way. Like,
and that's got to be in your heart to begin with.
It does, and I think that's how this community starts to heal. You know, this community, if you've probably noticed already, is very divided, but to just not...
Well, and it's funny that the ones that, from my perspective, are exacerbating the division are also the ones that are yelling, we should have unity for unity's sake.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm like, so what you're saying is, let's all get together and disagree.
Why can't we disagree and still be kind to one another?
Okay, so you used a word twice now, enemy.
Yes.
Okay. Scripture says, love your enemies. It's a profound thing. I heard Dr. Jordan Peterson say one time, the difference philosophically between an enemy and an opponent is that you can go at an opponent with everything you have to defeat them and walk away and love them. That's why you see guys in the UFC ring. I mean, I am going to break your arm. I've got this arm bar. I've got my leg over your neck. You're going to submit or you're going to die, right? And then get up and hug each other and go have dinner together. And you're like, that's as close to Mortal Kombat as you can get.
Yes.
And yet to have that human regard to love one another. And what I don't see, and it's a mindset thing, it's like the prophets at Mount Carmel. It's what I can only imagine looked like for the spirit that moved through along the river Nile in Egypt, when God said, all right, I'm done. I've given you all, this is all the negotiation. But he didn't draw the line in the sand, he drew it on the doorframe.
Right.
And what I find is our enemies, our opponents, they don't want to win the battle and then be friends.
No.
They want to utterly annihilate and destroy.
Oh, yes.
I can only imagine if we could superimpose human emotions on that spirit that came to destroy, what he felt like when he came to a door with the blood over it and went, oh, not here? Because that's the one I was coming to destroy. But then at the same time, that was the spirit moving. That spirit of death was on assignment by an almighty God who said, do what you do, but know your limits.
Well, and it leads to the question too, like with some of what I was calling my enemy, you know, in the Bible it talks about how some men are given over to the depravity of their mind. I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is actually a question for you, so maybe you can help teach me, but I feel like some of these people have been given over to the depravity of their mind, and can we, as Christians, can we ever have a real relationship with people like that? That's a question I ask myself that I don't have the answer for. I continue to pray for them.
There's a story of a ship at sea, and you maybe have heard this story. I'm going to take it a little bit further than what's normally taught, even in the pulpit. Ship is at sea, and he says, I see your light off my starboard bow. You need to change course. And the other light comes back and says, I'm not changing course. A little arrogance in the voice. And the captain says, you don't understand, I am Admiral so-and-so, Nimitz-class destroyer. I'm being followed by 25 other naval warships. We will blast you out of the water. They will not find the pieces. The other light comes back and says, I'm not changing course. He said, this is your last warning. You are off my starboard bow. You are entirely too close. You are coming too fast. Change your course. Do it now, or you will be destroyed. The other light says, I am a lighthouse. I cannot change course. But I'm here to let you know there's a big rock reef right in front of you, and if you don't change course, you are going to be destroyed by your own hand. And I realize when people use that from the pulpit, what they're trying to say is, God doesn't change course, you're going to collide. There's a great truth to that. Here's the secondary truth that most of them stop at. When my son was a teenager, he's bigger than me, has been since he was 16, 17 years old, playing football, driving the car to school, he's a man, right? And he and mom share a car at that time, and he's smoking in the car. And I said, why are you smoking in the car? You know your mother's deathly allergic to it. Stop doing that. And he's like, I didn't smoke in the car. And so I opened my hand with 6 cigarette butts that I had just pulled out of the door jamb between the seat and the door. And I punched him right in his chest. And I hit him so hard it took his breath away. He stumbled back. His girlfriend came out of the room. She's like, what just happened? And I said, he lied to me. He lied to my face. That was the collision. Mm-hmm. He found the rock reef. Fast forward 10 years. He's a dad. He's got a family to take care of. And at midnight, he calls me. He's like, is today trash day or is it yesterday? Did I miss it? Right? This is the same kid. That was a hard confrontation, but here's what I've told my kids all along, and this is what I believe is the biblical counsel even for the depraved mind. Now, there are those who take that depraved mind and go to Hebrews 6:4 and say there is no redemption for them. They can never be forgiven and come back. That's a big theological mess that I'm not sure that I'm qualified to get into, but we can debate it for those who feel like they're qualified to debate it. What I do know, though, is that Christ said, on the solid rock I stand. I am the rock. Don't build your house on the sand, because the sand's going to move every time the waves do. Build your house on the rock. So my job as the lighthouse isn't just to stand here for the purpose of the collision that's coming. It's also to know that when you do change course and you find yourself half a mile out at sea and you're like, I'm lost, I can say, you know what you need to know about the lighthouse? It never moved.
Right.
It didn't move to avoid the collision with you. It didn't move when imminent disaster came, and it didn't move now. And if you have now recognized I'm lost and I need my way back, look up. The lighthouse still hasn't moved. We had the blessing last July, after several, as friendly as we could make them, conversations with what I could only say at the time were New Age in-laws. We sat down with them for breakfast. He's 84. He's had several strokes and stents and et cetera, et cetera. And we sat down with them at breakfast, and he said, I just want you to know, last Christmas we gave our life to Jesus. And I'm like, yes.
That's awesome.
But we didn't try to force conversion on them. We didn't try to make them see the world our way. We just stood our ground where we are. I had a mother-in-law that told me straight up, I don't know why my daughter married you. I hate you. I wish you weren't in my life. And in my house, I'm the queen bee. It took 11 years for that woman to look me in the eye and go, I don't know why my daughter loves you, but obviously she does and all those kids do, and I give you permission to be you. I was like, it only took 11 years. But in light of eternity, to endure that relationship. And I think that's the hard thing. I see people who are, they call themselves evangelists at heart, and what they mean by that is, I will preach to a tree stump. And we saw a homeless guy, I presume he's homeless, shorts down around his middle of his thighs, drawers looked like they hadn't been washed in months, and maybe he hadn't even had a proper place to use the bathroom. Dirty, hair's a mess, beard's a mess. He's holding a sign that says, I want help. And I have to be honest and say, while I'm compassionate, I'm also a little bit, I don't know, reticent to give money to people that are physically capable and perhaps mentally challenged or unwilling to work.
Right.
And so I'm not going to yank money out of my pocket and give it to them right there. What I will say is I've got a full library of books that if you read any one of them will probably redirect the path of your life if you're willing to change. If you're not willing to change, there's not any hope for you. And that's not my place. But I do know people who have run up right there, right on that street corner, got out of their car and went, do you know Jesus? Do you have Jesus in your life? Are you going to hell when you die this week?
He needs a bath first and some food probably.
And so I have the challenge of how do we meet their needs? How do we stand the ground?
Yes.
But I also run across those many people that the first time we meet, it seems like massive conflict. Yeah, there's rocks there.
Yes, yes.
But when you avoid the rocks and you sustain a little longer and then you realize there was a place that I realized that conflict was necessary and now I'm just lost. Look up, because I'm in the same place that I have been for almost 50 years of my life and I'm not moving. Does that mean that I can't stand corrected? No, I absolutely stand corrected. And I love it when I have a conversation with somebody and I come in with a strong belief and they're like, but you're wrong and here's why. Awesome. I want to be correct.
I tell my kids all the time, I said, the only thing I'm absolutely positive of is that I know absolutely nothing. Well, I mean, that's a stretch. I know maybe this much, but like, I know that I'm not always right. You know, that there's, till the day I die, I'll be learning. I'll be learning.
We all should be. Simon Sinek and Jordan Peterson had a great conversation, and Simon Sinek said, I have strong opinions loosely held. And I thought, that is brilliant.
That is a good statement.
That's an endeavor, right?
Yes, yes, it is.
I believe what I believe. I know why I believe what I believe. But if there's better evidence, I want it.
Yes, that's so true. Because I think about, 20 years ago, what I believed then is different than what I believe now. And it's just forever changing. And then when we started doing mission trips and started traveling, outside of the United States, a lot of what I believed was challenged too.
Yeah.
So it does. It is ever changing.
I was listening to a guy on I think it was a Facebook reel this morning. And he said, I'm standing in the streets of Kazakhstan and asking people, do you want to come to America? And they're like, why? And he said, what I realize here is the streets are clean. The families are intact. The conversations are solid. And all these things that we're fighting over in the streets in America, what they say is the West is distracted.
We are.
And my question for them would be, that's an awesome statement, and I believe it, and I agree, but distracted from what?
Well,
I think Jesus answers that question. But.
Oh, he does. He does. But I feel like, too, like when we went to Paraguay, for example, we think... When we went over there, I remember, I'll never forget, standing in this lady's house, which was it was a dirt floor and like tree branches for a roof, and thinking to myself, this is the most peaceful place I've ever been in my entire life. And what I noticed when I was over there, they don't have half the material things that we do, but they were very receptive to Jesus and very, very receptive, but they're so family orientated, and they spend all day together, working together, and they have their animals or their garden or whatever. And I'll never forget just standing in the middle of poverty in South America and thinking, this is the most peaceful place I've ever been, because they're not in a hurry. They're not in a rush like we are. And the same thing when we went to Thailand. It's a little bit busier over there, but one thing we noticed, we were there for 11 days, and everybody's grateful. It's a lot of this, we were doing a lot of that. But, and we didn't realize it until we were on the plane. It was from LA back to Dallas, and we heard an American complain. And my son looks at me and he's like, Mom, that's so weird to hear someone complaining. I'm like, you're right, it is, because in the 11 days, and we were in the poverty-stricken area of Thailand, we didn't hear one of those people complain. And then my daughter said, she goes, it's easier to be around the natives of whatever country it is than it is the Americans sometimes that we came with.
Yeah.
Because they complain, but they're just so grateful, and they're so, like I said before, they honor the elders, you know, in their family, and it's all about family. A lot of times the whole family lives together in the same house, whereas here it's like when our parents get old, we stick them, not to say it's bad, because sometimes you have to, because sometimes they may need skilled nursing care.
The level of care that you can
yes,
provide
that
is
you
just not
can't
there.
provide. But we're such in a hurry to just put our parents away. Not all of us, but you know, it's the American
same
way.
thing with the young people. I mean, they're like, you're 18, it's time for you to move on. You know, get a life, you get a job, get a car. We've got a son with a young son. Their newest baby is special needs, and it takes a lot to care for a child who has special issues. He's a preemie. He's 8 months and barely 15 pounds. I mean, I can still hold him in one hand. He's a tiny little guy at 8 months old. We've got twins on the other side. Our daughter's twins are probably pushing 25, 30 pounds. I mean, they're only 5 months older than him. It's crazy, the difference. But that son still lives at home. And people are like, he's a grown man. Why don't you kick him out? I'm like, and then what? Send him a check every month because they can't make their bills, because the cost of living is so high,
right?
Because they need help, because they have to pay for special childcare, because you know they got 2 kids at home. And what would be the point of that? Right now, if mom's overwhelmed and it's midnight, she walks in and she's like, here, take the baby for a minute.
Yes.
And it's not travel down the street. And I think our society has lost a lot of that.
Yes.
And part of that's the compassion. Part of that is the selfishness and self-focused. And I teach about the attitude of entitlement. I also believe the attitude of entitlement is a spirit. Mm-hmm. And it's an otherworldly spirit that doesn't do good for us. Let's go back to your question. I think one of the challenges we see, both in the church and in the home, is that it's so easy to dismiss and abandon what doesn't suit us well. And many believers and many pastors, they're focused on growing that little fiefdom. You know, how do I get more attendees in my church? How do I get more attendees who are, for lack of a better term, indoctrinated in the process and the growth of our church, et cetera, et cetera. Here's what we believe. This is what we do. People like us do things like this, et cetera, et cetera. That's awesome. But are they growing the kind of people that will be fearless circa 1930?
Right.
Are they growing the kind of people who would nail the 95 Thesis to the door?
Or maybe the kind of people who would, during World War II, help hide the Jews? Like one of my biggest heroes, Corrie ten Boom.
Yeah.
And then, you know, had to go to a concentration camp, and I think she lost her sister and her mom and her dad.
There's a great movie called The Hiding Place.
Yes, I've seen it more than once.
Have you seen The Return to the Hiding Place?
No.
So The Return to the Hiding Place was produced by a friend of mine, Dr. Peter Spencer. And Peter was talking about the real woman who was known as Corrie ten Boom. And in a lecture, Dr. Peter Spencer has been an apologist at the highest level for years and years and years. And so in a lecture, he's talking about her and hiding the Jews and et cetera, et cetera. And as he says this, a guy in the audience walks up like it's Q&A time, walks up to stage, security stopping him, and Dr. Peter Spencer's like, are you okay? He said, when you speak of, will you do me a favor and just speak kindly of my friend? He's like, dude, you say that like you know her.
He did, didn't he?
Tears streaming down his face. He said, I was the Jew, the first Jew hidden in that wall. I put those bricks there myself. I encourage you to go to StoryPowerAcademy.com and check it out. Look at the different classes, the different levels, the different things that are available. You can take a lot of them a la carte. But spend some time there and see if that's the kind of thing that would change the way you communicate as a leader, as a pastor, as a counselor, as a political leader. And if that will help you, I'd love to have a conversation with you. Again, only 10 people in the Elite Speakers. You will have to apply for that. But if you're a candidate, I'd love to have that conversation with you.